So the purpose of calling this channel The Actual Justice Warrior was to emphasize that I am distinct from all those different forms of justice you hear about all too often from the left: environmental, social, and similar. And the reason why I wanted to make that distinction is because those qualifiers are inherently injustice. They're not for justice. And a perfect example of this is what is going on in Portland, where a developer was trying to protect his property from homeless people, from litter, from people trashing it, yet the city of Portland decided that he must face the consequences for the bad actions of people that they allow to live on the streets, and it got to the point where he was fined so excessively that he decided to pack up and leave the city. When you're punishing people who happen to own just because of people who are too poor to be punished, I guess, bad actions, you have reached peak insanity and peak social justice, which of course is injustice. Now we're going to get into this story because I think it's really important that you guys see this for what it is, that I shine a light on it, because I believe this is indicative of an overall worldview that has taken hold largely in the city of Portland, and of course it is a worldview that is driving that city into poverty. It's a worldview that has caused it to be the sixth most fleeing population city in the entire country since the George Floyd riots. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over on my website, actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Thank you to the podcast listeners on Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. And thank you to Mr. Sam Cedar for agreeing to do the debate. We are working out the details right now, and we should have something announced at some point in the future when I lock down a date. But without further ado, let's get into the video.
The phrase, the city that works. It's the city that jerks. You know, I mean, how can you be this dysfunctional?
This story's brand new at 6 tonight. Pulling out of Portland. After 4 decades of doing business in the city, a local developer says he's done.
I just want you to think about what was just said there. You have a developer in the city of Portland. Now, I know for some reason people have bought into the left-wing propaganda that developers are somehow the most evil people in the history of the world, but in reality, in actuality, the people who build should be admired, not condemned for no reason. So you have a guy who's fleeing Portland, and the reason why he's leaving the city after 4 decades is due to the fact that Portland policies are hitting him real close to home on his properties, and an unjust system of penalizing the property owner for the action of others has been weaponized against him, his business, and basically everything that he's worked towards in the city of Portland for the past 4 decades.
Ask Kevin Howard how he feels about Portland, and his emotions run the gamut. Mostly frustration as he opens the fence to his final slice of the city.
This property was listed in January of 21 for $795,000. Yesterday, we sold it for $412,000.
A big loss, but Kevin says he had nothing left in the tank. This tiny piece of property, a former pizza parlor, has been a nightmare for the past 3 years.
So notice the timetable that we're talking about here. We are covering this story in June of 2023, and he said 3 years ago that this was actually a pizzeria in this neighborhood. As we all know, George Floyd died in March of 2020. The Black Lives Matter riots took hold in the city of Portland from that point forward and across this nation, and his pizza parlor completely went under 3 years ago, and he wasn't able to do anything much with this property. So what he ultimately ended up doing was trying to, salvage it, trying to list it for sale. He listed it for $700,000, but because so many people are leaving the city of Portland, because it's so unbusiness friendly at this point, in that it quite literally let people burn, loot, and destroy businesses without any consequences, he ends up taking a $300,000 loss on his property. But at this point in time, he's fine with that, just to be done with not only Portland, but with the state of Oregon. But of course, the story gets worse. They talked about how he had a homeless person squatting in his property.
So supposed homeless came in and kicked in the front door, and lived in it. and I waited till they came out and I had to board it up.
So rather than confront the homeless person, he ended up waiting for that person to leave on their day-to-day business and boarding it up as a hopes of keeping that individual out. By the way, I would not be surprised if he could have faced potential illegal eviction charges from the city of Portland, because they would likely grant the God tier rights to the homeless person rather than him trying to protect the property that he invested his blood, sweat, and tears and money into.
But Kevin says that didn't do much. They just broke in again and again, living inside, outside, even in his dumpster enclosure, which they eventually set on fire.
So these guys come in, they squat on his property. He tries to board it up in order to keep them out. They re-enter. This is breaking and entering by any definition. They start using drugs in the property. They're sleeping all around it. They're absolutely trashing it. They even went so far as to set the dumpster enclosure on the property on fire because they have a reckless disregard for this property. Now, I've talked about how a bunch of left-wing cities have ridiculous squatters' rights, and I feel the need to explain the premise of squatters' rights so you can understand them, so you can understand that this is clearly and obviously not a good application of that principle. So originally the idea came from as follows. Let's say you're marching west to the new frontier and you discover a cabin that is seemingly abandoned. You decide to go in the cabin because you need shelter, and then over time you fix up the cabin, you plant crops, you pour your blood, sweat, and tears over the course of years into that property, making substantial improvements. Then all of a sudden, 5 years later, 10 years later, the original homeowner comes back to the property to discover you living in it. Now, one-to-one, a lot of people would say you just get the property back. But the thing is, you've improved this property. You've improved this lot of land. You have added value that cannot be restored to you. And the homeowner who did not put any of the work into that area would end up reaping the benefits of your labor. This is why we developed a system of squatters' rights in this country and in the English common law tradition. But the thing is, these people are not doing any of that. They're not improving the property. The property was not abandoned. This guy was actively trying to get them out from the jump.
And Kevin tells us he got nowhere when he called police.
And I said, well, what does the homeowner do? What does the property owner do? And they said, well, call the Central City Concern. And I said, what'll they do? And they said, well, they'll probably come out and give them a cup of coffee and some hot soup.
Yet, despite the fact that they are flying in the face of the very principle of squatters' rights, they are conferred all of these additional privileges in that when the homeowner calls the police, he's referred to an agency that will promise to bring them food, so presumably they can stay longer and trash the property even more.
He looked into hiring a security guard, but that was too expensive, $15,000 a month. So he decided to get a fence. But the wait was 4 months.
I said, why? And they said, because homeowners, like mad, are fencing their property to keep the drug addicts and the homeless out.
So because he can't afford security for the property at a rate of $15,000 a month, he ends up trying to get a fence. However, because fencing is so in demand in the city of Portland, because they've allowed homeless people and drug addicts to do whatever they want in the city of Portland, it ended up being a months-long wait. And during that course of time, these people continually trashed the property with needles and all these other things, so he worked towards cleaning it up. Now remember, the government in this instance was completely powerless to help him, according to the police and according to the organization that brings these people soup and hot coffee in order to make them feel better. But just because the government is completely powerless to help you doesn't mean, as that famous line from the Simpsons episode stated, that they're not powerless to hurt you.
So the trash piled up and Kevin tried to keep up, but it wasn't enough. Last summer, the city hit him with a nuisance fine.
And it was $539.71.
Kevin paid it. A month later, he got a bigger bill, the original amount plus a penalty. The city told him they lost his check. So he paid the bill again, plus the extra $100.
2 weeks later, they sent me another bill for $639.71. I called them up, and they said, this might be a duplicate bill.
That's right. They fined him. Now, of course, the dollar amount of the fine is not the issue in question. It was a little over $500. And of course, he tried to pay that immediately. Yet they said that they lost the check. Therefore, he owed them an extra $100. So then he pays that immediately. And then they send him another bill because Portland is just trying to extract as much revenue as possible from this individual. And obviously, because he didn't actively try hard enough to clean up after the people who essentially stole his property, deprived him of his property through criminal means, he is responsible for the garbage and the dump and all that because he owns it in all the ways that can hurt him, but apparently he doesn't own it in any of the ways that can benefit him.
But we've already put a lien on your property.
The fence was finally installed and Kevin was able to clean up the property and eventually get the lien removed. But the drama dragged on for more than 6 months.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that insane? Now, again, it was a small fine, and of course, he tried to pay it 3 different times, or ended up with 3 different bills, plus the fine for a late fee and all of that, but the city of Portland immediately initiated a lien against his property, which of course prevents him from selling it, and is the first step in them being able to take it, and this lien was over $600 and something. Remember, they say that if you steal under $1,000 from shoplifting each and every single day, that's no big deal, you get released on the street, because who cares about property? But this guy was going to lose his entire piece of property to a lien potentially over a fine of $539 with an additional late fee of $100. That's how the city of Portland works against its law-abiding citizens. There's obviously a different set of rules for the criminal citizens, and this is when this man had had enough.
I just remember the phrase, the city that works. It's the city that jerks. You know, I mean, how can you be this dysfunctional?
So I like that he is in good humor about this, but to be clear, this is no laughing matter. The city of Portland was working tirelessly to ruin this person's life for the crime of owning property and, of course, having all these criminals come and trash that property.
We reached out to the bureau that fined Kevin, Development Services. They confirmed there was an error, telling us the issue was resolved and there's no outstanding balance owed. We also asked Mayor Ted Wheeler's office for an interview. Wheeler has been vocal about improving livability, reducing taxes and fees, restoring people's faith in Portland.
People are picking up and they are leaving our community.
So isn't it crazy where we are in this country? Mayor Ted Wheeler, who of course was the guy who was backing Antifa during the Black Lives Matter riots, wouldn't do anything to stop the bleeding that was going on in a city, which led to the circumstances that they're facing now, where people feel it's an environment of lawlessness, stores are closing and whatnot, so they're fleeing the city, is all of a sudden sounding like a right-wing conservative on economics, trying to lure people back in through tax cuts and good public policy, more business-friendly public policy, because he's actually realized the error of his ways. And credit where credit is due to him in that regard for actually stepping up to the plate. This guy was one of those people who said it was authoritarian for Donald Trump to try to defend a federal courthouse in Portland, even though he should have defended the federal courthouse in Portland. And now he's talking like a free market economist, and it's absolutely amazing. On top of that, I just want to point out that this is the same guy that almost lost his election to some crazy Antifa lady, and he was being outflanked on the left by her, and ended up winning by the skin of his teeth in that mayoral primary, which, make no mistake about it, was in fact the mayoral election.
A spokesman told us the Bureau of Development Services is not under Mayor Wheeler's portfolio. Commissioner Carmen Rubio's office did not get back to us.
In the last year, 23,000, 13,000 for the fence, graffiti cleanup, painting the building.
$23,000 in 1 year just to manage this mess. But Kevin, who founded Northwest Self Storage and owns 70 properties over the past 4 decades, says it isn't about this one address.
And I've been all over the world. I live in Australia for a couple years. I've been in all 50 states in all over. And I came back to Portland and I came back to Oregon because I loved it. I loved the people, the greenery, the lifestyle, and
this was just the last straw.
So the fine is one thing. It's an insult after the injury. The lien, absolutely unbelievable, shameful. They should be naming and shaming that woman, showing her on camera and telling her that she ruined the city. But the $23,000 in cleaning up and maintaining this property, graffiti removal, and new paint, while you can still see new graffiti on top of it, is what pushed this man to his breaking point. The fact that he needed a fence, again, is what just left him frustrated beyond all belief. And here you have somebody who's a local giant in the area, 70 different properties, who sold off his entire portfolio because he's absolutely done with the city, and it's a city that he loved. It's kind of wild that you're seeing this happen in real time while we have so many people denying the objective reality that crime is driving poverty, not the other way around. Think about the tanking in this property value. Think about the fact that people were working in just this pizzeria only 3 years ago and now they have no jobs. Think about the fact that when all these businesses close or they have to raise prices to compensate for the theft, that those who are already struggling on fixed incomes or are low income end up paying more. Think about the fact that when all the grocery stores close, which by the way we've covered in Portland, them closing their Walmarts that offer goods at low prices, which again benefit the least fortunate among our society. Well, those people now have to pay higher prices for their groceries because guess what? They still have to eat, and the cheaper alternatives have left town. This doesn't even take into account the fact that housing, like other properties, like these business properties, are also going to go on the decline due to the blight in the city. This doesn't take into account that if you have like a strip mall where there used to be 10 stores and that mall was dependent on foot traffic, even the closing of some of those stores is going to reduce and put a strain on the remaining stores, and this could have all been prevented just by not letting homeless drug addicts camp out in front of these stores or in these parking lots. This could have all been prevented by not actually stopping the prosecution of retail theft, which has grown to the extent where it's largely being done by organized criminals. Portland had something like 30 straight years of increasing population. It was a left-wing city for the longest time, but it attracted a younger kind of person, a hipster kind of person that would actually spend money, would actually work in productive high-end jobs, and now all of that is falling by the wayside due to the fact that those young people's politics have taken over the city of Portland. So while I want to commend Ted Wheeler for trying to reverse course now, he has been responsible for a significant portion of the damage. So while I'm rooting for a turnaround because I want people to see examples of this being turned around, I am not rooting for his personal political success. If this guy would fall by the wayside in terms of his political career and wouldn't be replaced by an Antifa madwoman, that would be my ideal scenario. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the death of Portland. Till next time.